Hey guys, today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this awesome vintage Minolta lens that I have and what I believe to be a common problem and a fix. So first of all, let me just walk you around the lens. So this is a autofocusing Minolta reflex lens in 500mm. This was probably released around 1989, and it's an awesome lens. I have taken pictures of jet aircraft flying at super high altitude. I mean, I'm not exactly sure how high, but they don't seem like they're at their maximum altitude, but you know, maybe 20,000 feet or so. And the pictures come out really well. As you can see, because this is a reflex lens, it has a bit of a different build here. So instead of having glass lenses, there may be a glass element or two in there, but it's got mostly this mirror here that provides the magnification. Another interesting thing about this lens is it doesn't have an aperture slide control here like most of the Sony A-mount lenses do. That being the case, Minolta wanted to provide users with a way to manage the amount of light that might be getting to the sensor for example, during bright sunlight. So what they did is they put this slot here and they provided a couple of ND filters. So this is a 4X, and they also provided a normal filter. This was supposed to be left in place at all times unless you needed the 4X. Now, the problem with this is a very poor choice of materials for the retaining clip. So there's a retaining clip that's supposed to go here, and I'll show you what mine looks like at this point. That's what it looks like. Okay, and this has happened to both of my ND filters, and I treat this thing really gingerly. And as a matter of fact, I hardly ever remove the normal from the lens. It was very rare that I would have to make a switch. And one day I went to remove this and the retaining clip busted really easily. And then the same thing happened to this. So I'm going to show you guys how to repair this and turn that into that. So this is the goal right here. And I have replaced all of the plastic bits with metal bits, so we shouldn't have this problem again. And just to show you how I think this happens is the way this retaining clip works is the spring fits over it like this. This little retaining piece goes into a slot here, and there's normally a little bit of additional plastic on the end. The whole assembly goes in here, and then you can twist this back and forth to change the angle of this, and this clip being in one orientation will allow the ND filter to pop out. Well, I think it's just the fact that this was cheap plastic, and I mean, let's face it, the lens is almost 30 years old. That constant tension by the spring on this tiny little piece of plastic here is just enough to make it break. So I think it's probably a common problem. I would be willing to bet that people have gone out and taken pictures with their lens and they rotated it like I showed a minute ago, and this thing dropped out on the ground and they had no idea that they even lost it. Because if you look on the listings on eBay, you'll find that a lot of these lenses actually come without these adapters. And you know, I think that could be one way that happens. Another thing I should mention is I did look into replacing these ND filters directly from Sony. They do sell them, but they're $100. So I said, okay, that's not happening. Before going to the garage, I thought I would go over the materials that are required, and I also wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about how long it takes to do this project. So you might be very surprised to find that this doesn't take that long at all. I would say if you're organized and you have your parts and your materials and you just need to do the work, it's probably not going to take you more than half an hour, and that even accounts for some drying time of the epoxy that we're going to be using. So it's really minimum effort, and then you come out with this awesome product right here, which is how Minolta frankly should have designed it in the first place. All right, in terms of materials, so first of all, we need to think about what we need to replicate this guy. So one part of this, of course, is this shaft right here. So I measured this shaft with my calipers, and I found out it is about 4 millimeters. Well, I got real lucky. As it turns out, I had this 4 millimeter brass pipe, brass tube, in my garage from another project. So you're going to want to pick some of this up. And I will leave links for all of this stuff in the description as always. The next thing you're going to need to replicate is this little grippy bit on the end here. So for me, I had a box of M3 screws laying around in the hex type, and this is a 3 millimeter, which I found to be the correct length because you do have to account for this distance here. It can't be too long, and you don't want something sticking out of here that's too long. So M3 screw, 6 millimeter. You're also going to need this original part, which is the little retaining pin, and you're going to need this original part, which is the spring. This guy and the broken bit, you can toss those. You're not going to need those again. Okay, other items. I would recommend using a Dremel for high-speed drilling, and this is a 1/16 of an inch drill bit, and high-speed cutting. So this is for the brass tube. You're going to need to cut the brass tube, and you're going to need to drill the hole in here for this retaining pin. Some other items are for the assembly. I actually found a head-mounted magnifying glass to be really important because you're going to need both hands free. I actually go over this one in another video, so this is the Pros Kit MA016. You can check out my other video on that. And other assembly items, some 5-minute epoxy, a nail to stir the epoxy, a toothpick to apply the epoxy, and a piece of cardboard to work on. And then, as always, you want to think safety first, so we got our safety glasses here. Another item that I think is pretty important is a little vise. So this guy works really well. It's got this suction thing here so you can suck it down to a flat surface. And then for me, I actually happen to have a drill press that can accommodate a Dremel tool. So the Dremel goes down into this right here, and then you can use the drill press to drill that, to tap that hole right there. So I understand everyone's not going to have this. This is probably not a critical component, but it's a nice to have. All right, let's head out to the garage. All right, so here we are in the garage. Now, one of the first things you need to do is figure out how long to make that brass tube. So what I did was I stuck the brass tube into the hole here, busted out my trusty rusty Sharpie, and then try to get down as close as you can to mark that length. Alright, so now it's time to drill. And I think drilling is the more difficult task between drilling and cutting. So I'm actually going to do the drilling first in case I screw it up. Alright, let's give this a shot. In terms of placement, I would say you want to drill the hole such that you're leaving 1/16 of an inch of material on the end of the brass tube. Alright, here we go. Try to get it right there in the middle. Takes a second to get started, but once it does, it goes right through like butter. And then I'll just continue to go through the other side. And run it through a little bit to clean that hole up. And you're done. So be careful, there's some burrs on the end, but that's what that looks like. Alright, it's time to do some cutting. So since I drilled that hole a little bit too far from the end, I'm going to go ahead and use my rotary cutting tool to take away some of the material on the end. I could file it down using sandpaper, but I think that's going to take forever. Here we go. Check my work. That looks sufficient. And I just wanted to make sure that this pin goes in here nicely. So there you go, it fits in perfectly. Now it's loose, but the epoxy is going to take care of that. I'm actually going to take a minute to sand this down and do a test. I'm going to put it down inside of the filter and make sure that that distance that the pin is from the end, or the hole is from the end, is a good distance. Alright, so a little test. Fits right in there, and I can tell that when I rotate this, the pin is going to clear this little piece of plastic right here. That's important. And I'm going to check it on both sides in case I drilled my hole a little bit crooked or off center, and it looks like it's going to clear on both sides. So I'm happy with this, and I'm going to go ahead and take my Sharpie and remark my cutting mark here for my length. Alright, let's cut. Alright, so I'm ready to cut, and I know exactly how this goes because I did the other one. This place here where I drew the line is actually going to make it a little bit too long, so I'm actually going to cut it a little bit closer to the end. Here we go. If I can get these glasses on. Yowza! Okay, so that's why we wear safety glasses. I didn't have this thing snug enough in there. Alright, here we go. Now it's going to be hot, so be careful. Alright, that looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this up using the sandpaper, and then I'm going to do another test. So you want to go back and forth, round and round, get the edges. And I need to do this on both ends. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's see what this thinks. This thinks it's pretty good too, I think. Yeah, perfect. So, with that little adjustment in the cut I made, it's perfectly flush, which is what I wanted, because the other one that I made sticks out just a little bit. So this is going to be perfect. I'll see you inside for the assembly. Okay, here we are back inside. Now you may find that you run into this problem too. This is going to be pretty snug in here. So one of the first things you're going to need to do is get it out of there. So I just used a toothpick. I stick it in the hole and out it comes. For the first part of this assembly, all you're really going to want to do is put this in, get this guy oriented so that it's right in the middle, and once it's in the middle, okay, so imagine that sitting down inside. Once that's in the middle, we're going to take some of our glue and just come down on the top and just try to get some right in here where this guy, this retaining clip, meets the inside of the brass tube. So you're going to take your toothpick and just dab around down inside like that. And I would use very, very little amounts of glue. Just dab around inside. Once this I'm using 5-minute epoxy, and I would totally recommend that for you as well. Once this gets to about a minute or so, it'll start to get tacky, a little bit gummy, and at that point you have less of a chance of this accidentally moving back and forth. But as you're doing this, be mindful in the beginning that you might be moving this guy back and forth. So you might have to make some minor adjustments by pressing in on it from one side or the other. So here's where the head-mounted magnifier comes into play, particularly in ensuring that this guy is dead center. Sticking out a little bit too far on this side. I'm actually going to use this other one for reference. Okay, that looks about right. Alright, so I'm going to mix up a little bit of glue here. Mix this up. And I'm just going to get a dab on the very end of this. Because the thing is, you don't want it running out of the hole and then getting onto any of the plastics. We want to keep this strictly on the inside. You can see that pin is moving around as I do this. So I'm going to have to make some additional adjustments here in a second. Alright, now time to make some adjustments. Seemed like it was a little bit too much on one side, on this side. Okay, that looks about right. So now we let it sit. All right, it's been a little over an hour, so I'm gonna check this thing out and see if the epoxy is nice and set, and it appears to be. This little part here is not moving at all, and the epoxy palette that I had earlier, all the epoxy is nice and hard. So okay, so the next step, and by the way, I should have mentioned this, as you're putting the epoxy in here into the brass tube using the toothpick, of course it's going to be difficult not to get any on the sides. That's actually okay, because you need something to hold the hex screw that we're going to put in there. So let's go into our little box of screws here, and I'm not going to try to say that word because I don't want YouTube to censor my video, but yeah, I have these nicely branded screws here. Okay, so M3 by 6mm is what we're going for, and here we go. So you put the spring on next, just lay that on there, and then you can just do this with your finger. Now there's some resistance because I'm hitting glue, and that's just fine. And now it's getting to a point here where I can't do it with my fingers anymore, so I'm gonna use an Allen key. I'm actually using a Torx, but it's fine. And we'll just keep tightening down until we meet the brass tube. That's it. So this guy is donezo. Look at that. Nice. And let's see how it works inside of our lens. Not coming out. Not coming out. Twist it, and it comes out. So there you go. Alright guys, so that's going to do it for my video on how to repair the retaining clip for the ND filters for the Minolta 500mm automatic focus reflex lens from the 1980s. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Perhaps you even own one of these lenses and needed to make the repair yourself. Or maybe you're just the type of person that really likes virtual thumbs. In any case, I would really appreciate it if you go crazy on that like button. Just don't go too crazy, because I think if you hit it an even number of times, you might accidentally unlike it. In any case, I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you for tuning in. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. I try to answer all the questions that I get, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks a lot, guys.